Close your eyes and let the present world fade away. Let the hum of electricity, the warmth of your central heating, and the soft glow of screens disappear into the darkness. Instead, imagine you are standing in a field of churned mud, the air biting at your exposed skin with a damp, penetrating chill that seems to settle deep in your bones. It is the year 1250. Before you stands a structure that defines this age, a medieval castle. From the history books and fairy tales of your childhood, you might expect a scene of fluttering banners, golden trumpets, and noble lords and ladies dancing in silk. But the reality that greets you is something far different, far grimmer, and infinitely more grounded in the brutal struggle for survival. The structure looming above you is not a palace, it is a machine of war, a fortress of gray stone designed to withstand siege, not to comfort the human body. If this story is helping you relax, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next journey into history. As you approach the outer walls, the first thing that hits you is not the majesty of the architecture, but the smell. It is a thick, cloying odor that hangs heavy in the mist, a mixture of wood smoke, wet wool, animal dung, and the unmistakable stench of human waste. This is the scent of the Middle Ages, and here, concentrated within the high stone walls of the castle, it is inescapable. You walk toward the gatehouse, your boots sinking into the slurry of earth and refuse that coats the ground. There is no pavement here, only mud that freezes hard in the winter and turns to a sucking bog in the rain. The castle does not welcome you, it tolerates you. The massive wooden gates are scarred and weathered, reinforced with iron that has rusted to the color of dried blood. As you pass under the portcullis, the heavy iron grate suspended like a guillotine above your head, the light is swallowed by the shadows of the murder holes above, from which defenders could rain death upon intruders. But today there is no battle, only the slow, grinding routine of daily life. Entering the courtyard or the bailey, you are struck by the noise. It is not the orderly silence of a museum, but a cacophony of industry. Blacksmiths hammer at iron, the rhythmic clanging echoing off the stone walls like a slow heartbeat. Chickens and pigs roam freely, rooting through the straw and filth that covers the ground, competing with the servants for space. The castle is essentially a fortified village, a self-contained ecosystem where hundreds of people live on top of one another, packed into a space designed for defense, not population density. You make your way toward the keep, the central tower and the heart of the Lord's power. It stands stark and imposing, a vertical tunnel of stone rising into the gray sky. This is where the luxury is supposed to be. But as you push open the heavy oak door and step inside, you realize luxury is a relative term. The transition from the outdoors to the indoors offers little relief. The air inside the keep is arguably worse than outside. It is stale, trapped by thick walls and narrow slit windows that were built to stop arrows, not to let in air or light. Your eyes take a moment to adjust to the gloom. The primary source of light comes from tallow candles and rushlights, reeds dipped in animal fat that burn with a sputtering, smoky flame. They cast long, dancing shadows that make the stone walls seem to move and breathe. The smoke from these primitive lights, combined with the smoke from the central hearth, creates a permanent haze that stings your eyes and coats the back of your throat with soot. You cough, a dry, hacking sound that is echoed by almost everyone else in the room. Respiratory issues are a constant companion here. Your lungs are forever filtering the byproducts of burning wood and fat. You are standing in the Great Hall. In movies, this is often depicted as a place of grandeur, with high ceilings and clean floors. The reality is far more cluttered and sensory. The floor beneath your feet is not polished stone or warm wood. It is packed earth, or perhaps stone flags, but you would hardly know it, for it is covered in a layer of rushes, dried grasses and reeds scattered to provide insulation and catch debris. But these rushes are not changed daily. In fact, in many castles, the bottom layers of rushes might sit there for months or even years. As you walk, you can feel the softness of the decay beneath your boots. Hidden within this mat of vegetation are bones from previous meals, spittle, vomit from drunken nights, dog excrement, and the scuttling forms of beetles and rats. The floor is a living history of the castle's waste, a compost heap that you are forced to walk upon, sit upon, and sometimes sleep upon. The cold is the next sensation that overwhelms you. Stone is an excellent material for keeping out arrows and battering rams, but it is terrible at retaining heat. In the summer, the castle feels like a damp cave. In the winter, it feels like a tomb. The great hall is dominated by a central hearth, an open fire burning in the middle of the room. There is no chimney in the modern sense. The smoke rises up to the high rafters, drifting lazily toward a louver or a hole in the roof. While the heat is intense if you are standing directly next to the fire, move just 10 feet away and the warmth vanishes, sucked into the vast, drafty space. You can see your breath in the air as you stand near the walls. The tapestries hanging on the walls are not merely for decoration. They are a desperate attempt to stop the drafts that whistle through the cracks in the masonry. They are heavy, dusty, and smell of mildew, acting as a barrier between the freezing stone and the living space, but they are fighting a losing battle. If this story is helping you relax, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next journey into history. Imagine trying to relax in this environment. You are wearing layers of wool and linen, heavy and scratchy against your skin. The concept of comfortable clothing does not really exist. You wear what you have to survive the temperature. As you sit on a wooden bench, chairs are a rare luxury reserved for the lord and his family. You feel the chill seeping up through the wood. There is no privacy here. The great hall is the living room, the dining room, the office, and for many of the household staff, the bedroom. At night, the benches are pushed aside and pallets of straw are laid out on the rush-covered floor. You lie down, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, wrapped in your cloak. The sound of snoring, coughing, and the rustling of vermin in the straw fills the air. You are never truly alone. The idea of personal space is a futuristic fantasy. Here, life is communal, intimate, and often suffocating. But let us move deeper into the daily experience. Let's talk about the water. You are thirsty, and your throat is parched from the smoke. In the corner of the hall stands a large wooden barrel. You might think to grab a cup of water, but you hesitate. In the medieval castle, water is a source of suspicion. The well in the courtyard is deep, digging down into the earth to find the water table, but it is often dangerously close to the cesspits where human waste is dumped. Contamination is a constant threat. The water is cold and often clouded with sediment. Instead, you are handed a tankard of ale. It is weak, low in alcohol, but it is safer than the water. This means that from the moment you wake until the moment you sleep, you are likely in a state of very mild intoxication, a dull buzz that helps to take the edge off the cold and the monotony, but also leaves you perpetually dehydrated. The ale is thick, almost like liquid bread, providing calories as well as hydration. It coats your tongue and leaves a sour aftertaste that lingers, because dental hygiene is primitive at best. As the morning light struggles to penetrate the narrow windows, the castle begins to wake. The noise level rises. The lord of the castle and his family might have their own private chambers, known as the solar, usually located on an upper floor to take advantage of rising heat. But even there, comfort is minimal. If you were a servant, your day would begin long before dawn. The first task is the fire. If the embers in the great hall have died out, they must be rekindled, a laborious process with flint and steel, or by borrowing fire from the kitchen. The smell of the morning is not coffee or fresh toast, but the reheating of yesterday's pottage and the pungent odor of the latrines. Speaking of latrines, this is perhaps the most harrowing aspect of castle life, the one that truly shatters the romantic illusion. You feel the urge to relieve yourself. You ask for the privy chamber or the garderobe. You are directed to a small alcove built into the thickness of the outer wall. A heavy wooden door separates it from the corridor, but it does little to block the smell. Opening the door, you are hit with a wave of ammonia and decay that makes your eyes water. The toilet itself is nothing more than a wooden bench with a hole cut into it, positioned directly over a chute that empties out of the castle wall and down into a moat or a cesspit below. In the winter, the wind howls up this chute, freezing your exposed skin instantly. There is no water to flush. The waste simply piles up below, sometimes staining the castle walls with long, dark streaks. The name garderobe actually comes from the French for wardrobe, because people would hang their clothes in the toilet shaft, believing that the intense ammonia fumes from the urine would kill the fleas and lice infesting their garments. Imagine that. The smell of the toilet was considered a cleaning agent. That is the level of hygiene we are dealing with. You finish your business and reach for something to clean yourself. There is no paper. Instead, you find a bucket of moss, hay, or perhaps a gong stick with a rag attached, which is shared by everyone who uses the facility. You do your best, but you never feel truly clean. You pull your heavy woolens back up and exit the small, stinking room, returning to the smoky haze of the main hall. This is the baseline of existence here. It is a life lived in close proximity to bodily functions, where the boundaries between waste and living space are uncomfortably thin. Leaving the pungent air of the garderobe behind, you follow a different scent, one that is slightly more appealing, but equally overwhelming. The smell of roasting meat and wood smoke. Your stomach rumbles, reminding you that survival here is fueled by calories, and in the bitter cold, your body burns through them fast. You head towards the kitchen. In many castles, the kitchen is a separate structure, often built of timber in the bailey or attached to the keep by a covered walkway. This isn't for convenience, it is out of fear. Fire is the single greatest threat to a medieval castle. With rushes on the floors, timber roofs, and open hearths, a spark can turn this fortress into a stone oven in minutes. So the kitchen, the place where the fires burn hottest and longest, is kept at a safe distance. As you step across the threshold, the temperature change is physically staggering. You go from the damp chill of the courtyard to a wall of heat that hits you like a physical blow. The kitchen is a cavernous space dominated by enormous fireplaces that could easily fit a standing man. Inside them, whole logs crackle and spit, consuming entire forests over the course of a winter. The noise here is deafening. Cooks are shouting orders, pots are clanging, and cleavers are thudding against wood. It is a factory of food. The staff here are not the pristine chefs of modern TV. They are drenched in sweat, their faces red from the heat, their clothes stained with grease and blood. Hygiene is, once again, a distant concept. A cook might wipe his running nose on his sleeve and then immediately plunge his hands into a bowl of dough. There are no hairnets, no latex gloves, and certainly no health inspectors. Your eyes are drawn to the spit. A massive joint of meat, perhaps a haunch of venison or a whole pig, is slowly rotating over the roaring fire. But look closer at the mechanism. Turning a heavy animal over a fire for hours is back-breaking, monotonous work. In some castles, a small, unhappy boy known as a turnspit sits near the flames, his skin blistered by the heat, endlessly cranking the handle. In others, they use a turnspit dog, a specific breed of short-legged dog bred to run inside a wooden wheel mounted on the wall, like a hamster in a cage, powering the rotation of the spit. The animal looks exhausted, panting heavily, driven by the fear of a hot coal thrown at its feet if it slows down. This is the engine of the medieval kitchen. Muscle power, human or animal, exploited to the limit. But let's talk about the food itself. What are you actually going to eat? If you are imagining fresh farm-to-table produce, think again. In the depth of winter, freshness is a luxury that vanished months ago. The medieval diet is dictated by preservation. The cows and pigs were slaughtered in late autumn because there wasn't enough fodder to keep them alive through the winter. That meat has been salted, smoked, or pickled to keep it from rotting. The ham hanging from the rafters looks rock hard. Before it can be eaten, it often has to be soaked in water for days just to draw out enough salt to make it palatable. Even then, it is tough, stringy, and incredibly salty. Vegetables are viewed with suspicion by the upper classes, considered peasant food that causes wind and melancholy. However, they are a staple for everyone else. Cabbages, onions, leeks, and peas are boiled down into a thick sludge. There is a cauldron hanging over the fire that never truly empties. This is the pottage. Every day, new ingredients are thrown into the pot. A rabbit caught by a guard, a handful of oats, some old carrots. The mixture simmers perpetually. You might be eating a bowl of stew that contains the remnants of a meal from 3 days ago. The flavors meld into a brown, uniform taste that is savory but indistinct. Then there is the issue of green meat. Without refrigeration, meat goes off. It's a simple fact. But in a castle, you cannot afford to throw away food. If a deer carcass has been hanging a bit too long and has started to turn slightly green or smell rank, the cooks don't discard it. They mask it. This is why spices are worth their weight in gold. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg are imported from the distant East at immense cost, not just to show off wealth, but to cover the taste of decay. For the lord at the high table, the meat is heavily spiced and sauced to hide the fact that it is bordering on rancid. For you, sitting lower down the hall, you might have to rely on mustard, garlic, or vinegar to numb your tongue against the taste of spoilage. The meal is announced, and you head back to the great hall. The transformation is slight. Tables have been set up on trestles, simple wooden boards placed over legs. They are temporary, designed to be packed away so the hall can be used for sleeping or holding court later. You find your place on a bench. The seating arrangement is rigid. The lord and his family sit at the high table on a raised dais at one end of the room, literally looking down on everyone else. You are seated at the lower tables, perpendicular to them. Where you sit determines what you eat. The fresh roasted meat, the white bread, and the good wine go to the high table. By the time the servants reach you, the platters are lighter, holding the tougher cuts, the darker, coarser bread, and the watered-down ale. You look for your plate, but there isn't one. Not a ceramic or wooden one, at least. Instead, a servant places a thick, rectangular slab of stale bread in front of you. This is a trencher. It is made from coarse flour and has been left to go stale for several days, so it is hard enough to act as a container. The stew and meat are ladled directly onto this bread. As you eat, the juices and grease soak into the trencher, softening it. It is an edible plate. If you are very hungry, you might eat the trencher at the end of the meal, but often these gravy-soaked slabs are collected and given to the poor waiting at the castle gates or thrown to the dogs. Speaking of dogs, they are everywhere. As you pull a piece of gristle from your teeth, you feel a wet nose against your thigh. Hunting hounds roam the hall freely during dinner. They fight under the tables, snapping at falling scraps. The floor beneath the tables is a chaotic zone of animal instinct. If you drop a bone, it vanishes instantly into a set of jaws. But be careful. The etiquette manuals of the time specifically warn you not to pet the dogs while eating. Why? Because your hands are your cutlery. Forks do not exist yet. You have a knife, which you probably brought with you on your belt, and you have a spoon for the broth. For everything else, you use your fingers. You grab a chunk of meat, cut it with your personal knife, and pop it into your mouth. If you pet the mange-ridden dog under the table and then touch your food, you are inviting illness. Dining is a communal act, intimately so. You do not have your own cup. A large goblet or tankard is passed down the line. You take a drink and pass it to your neighbor. You watch as the man next to you wipes his grease-stained mouth with the back of his hand before taking a swig, leaving a smear of fat on the rim. You have no choice but to put your lips to the same spot. Germ theory is centuries away, but your instinct recoils. You share platters, you share cups, and sometimes, if the castle is crowded, you share the trencher itself with a messmate. Trust is required. You have to trust that your neighbor has washed his hands, he likely hasn't, and that he isn't sick, he likely is. The noise in the hall during the meal is a dull roar. There is the clatter of knives, the slurping of soup, which is not considered rude, but a sign of enjoyment, and the boisterous conversation of 50 or 100 people. The smoke from the central fire thickens as fat drips into the embers, stinging your eyes. Above you, in the dark rafters, birds that have flown in through the unglazed windows flutter and roost. Occasionally, a feather, or something worse, drops from the darkness onto the tables below. You learn to guard your food with your arm. As the meal winds down, you notice the salt. In the center of the high table sits a massive, ornate salt cellar. It is a symbol of status. Those seated above the salt, the Lord and his honored guests, are the elite. They get the expensive mineral to season their food. You, down here, are below the salt. You eat what you are given. The hierarchy of the castle is etched into every bite you take. You are full, perhaps, but you feel heavy. The food is dense, rich in fat and carbohydrates, designed to keep you warm and working, not to keep you healthy. Your stomach churns slightly, protesting the heavy load of salted pork and rye bread. But the day is not over. As the tables are cleared, literally the boards are lifted off the trestles and carried away, the hall transitions again. The entertainment begins, but it is not always the lute-playing minstrel you expect. It is often rougher, louder, and soon the sun will set completely, plunging the castle into a darkness deeper than anything you know in the modern world. The candles are expensive. When the fire dies down, the true night of the Middle Ages begins, and with it, the creatures that rule the dark come out to play.
The sun has finally vanished behind the horizon, and with it, the world has shrunk. In the modern era, we push back the night with the flip of a switch, turning cities into perpetual twilight. But here, in the year 1250, night is absolute. It is a physical weight that presses against the stone walls. Inside the castle, the gloom is conquered only by the flickering, greasy light of tallow candles and the dying embers of the central hearth. The great hall, which was a dining room only an hour ago, is now transforming into a dormitory. This is the reality of medieval sleeping. It is not a private retreat, but a communal warehousing of humanity. If you are a servant, a guard, or a lower-ranking member of the household, you do not have a room. You do not even have a bed in the sense that you understand it. Your bed is the floor. As the tables are dismantled and leaned against the cold stone walls, the space opens up. Servants bring in bundles of straw or retrieve pallets that have been stashed in corners during the day. A pallet is essentially a large sack stuffed with straw, hay, or sometimes wool if you are lucky. It is lumpy, it smells of dry grass and dust, and it is thinner than you would like. You find a spot on the floor, ideally close enough to the central fire to catch some residual warmth, but not so close that you risk a spark landing on your bedding and igniting you while you sleep. Competition for these spots is fierce. The hierarchy of the day continues into the night. The senior servants claim the spots near the hearth or away from the drafty doors. The lowest of the low, the scullery maids, the turnspits, the stable boys are pushed to the edges, into the dark corners where the drafts from the arrow slits cut like knives. You lay down your pallet on the rushes. Remember those rushes? The ones covering the floor that hide months of food scraps, dog waste, and spittle? That is now your mattress foundation. You are sleeping on top of the castle's compost. You prepare for sleep. In the winter, you likely sleep in your clothes. The cold is simply too intense to strip down. You wrap yourself in your cloak, pulling it tight around your shoulders. If you have a blanket, it is made of coarse, scratchy wool that feels heavy but offers limited insulation against the stone beneath you. But sleeping in your clothes brings its own torment. It creates a warm, humid microclimate next to your skin, a paradise for parasites. This brings us to the true horror of the medieval night, the bugs. You are never sleeping alone. Every person in this hall, from the lowest peasant to the lord in his high tower, is infested. Lice are a fact of life. They live in the seams of your woolen tunic, drinking your blood and leaving itchy red welts. As your body warms up under the cloak, the lice become active. You feel them moving, a sudden sharp prick on your rib cage, then another on your neck. You shift, you scratch, but you cannot escape them. They are part of you. And then there are the fleas. The rushes on the floor are teeming with them. As you lie still, they migrate from the floor to your body. You might wake up in the morning with lines of bites running up your legs. In this era, religious figures sometimes refer to lice and fleas as the pearls of God, a test of patience sent by the Almighty. If that is true, everyone here is being tested severely. There is no chemical spray, no fumigation. The only way to reduce the population is to physically pick them off, a social activity known as grooming that people do by the fire in the evening, or to hang your clothes in the ammonia-filled garderobe, hoping the stench kills them. But tonight, you just have to endure the itching. It is a constant, low-level torture that makes deep restorative sleep almost impossible.
The room is settling down, but it is never quiet. You are surrounded by 50 other people. The air is filled with the sounds of human biology. There is a symphony of snoring. Some rumbles are deep and resonant. Others are high-pitched whistles. Someone coughs, a wet, rattling sound that speaks of the chronic bronchitis that plagues everyone who breathes this smoky air. In the corner, someone is muttering in their sleep. Another person gets up to use the bucket in the corner because the walk to the freezing garderobe is too daunting in the dark. The smell of the unwashed bodies, magnified by the heat of the fire and the wool covers, becomes thick and tangible. It is the scent of humanity in its rawest form: sweat, breath, flatulence, and dirt. Now, let us look upstairs. Surely the Lord and Lady have it better. Yes, but not by as much as you might think. The Lord retires to the solar, the private family room. Here there is a fireplace with a chimney, so the smoke is less choking, though it still puffs back into the room when the wind blows the wrong way. The bed is the most expensive piece of furniture in the castle. It is a massive wooden frame, roped together to support a mattress. The mattress is stuffed with feathers rather than straw, which is softer but still prone to harboring mites. The defining feature of the noble bed are the curtains. Thick, heavy velvet curtains surround the bed on all four sides. This is not just for decoration or privacy, it is a survival mechanism. The curtains create a room within a room, trapping body heat so the occupants don't freeze. They also offer a small barrier against the drafts that whistle through the solar. But privacy is still an illusion. The Lord and Lady rarely sleep alone in the room. Their most trusted body servants sleep on trundle beds, small cots that roll out from under the main bed, or simply on the floor at the foot of the bed. If the Lord wants a drink of water in the night, a servant must be there to hand it to him. If the fire dies down, a servant must stoke it. Even in their most intimate moments, the nobility is surrounded by an audience of staff. Back in the great hall, the fire has burned down to glowing red coals. This is the time of the curfew. The word comes from the French couvre-feu, meaning cover the fire. A metal lid or a ceramic cover is placed over the embers to dampen them and prevent sparks from flying while everyone sleeps. This is a matter of life and death. If a stray spark lands on the dry straw rushes or a straw pallet, the great hall could become an inferno in minutes. There are no fire extinguishers, no hydrants. A fire at night usually means death, so the curfew is strictly enforced. The hall plunges into near total darkness. Now, with the light gone, the other inhabitants of the castle emerge. You hear them before you see them, the scratching of claws on stone, the rustling of dry straw. Rats. They are everywhere. During the day, the dogs keep them somewhat at bay, but at night, the castle belongs to the rodents. They scurry along the walls, their eyes reflecting the faint glow of the dying embers. They are bold. They smell the food residue on the floor, the grease on the trenchers, and the crumbs in your bedding. You might feel a small weight press down on your ankle, then move quickly across your legs. A rat running over a sleeping body is a common occurrence. You kick out your leg, and the weight vanishes, only to reappear somewhere else. These rats are not just a nuisance, they are carriers of disease, vectors of the plague that will, in the mid-14th century, wipe out half of Europe. But even before the Black Death, they are thieves of grain and spreaders of filth. You pull your cloak tighter, trying to cover your face to protect it from the cold and the rats. You drift into a light, fitful doze. But then a noise from outside startles you. The wind is howling around the stone towers, a mournful, shrieking sound that sounds almost human. In the medieval mind, the night is not just dark, it is spiritually dangerous. This is the time when demons, spirits, and witches are active.
The woods surrounding the castle are not just trees, they are the domain of the unknown. Every creak of the timber roof, every shadow that seems to move, is laden with superstitious fear. You say a silent prayer, clutching a small wooden cross or an amulet. The physical walls of the castle protect you from enemy armies, but they cannot protect you from the terrors of the medieval imagination. And what if the castle is under threat? Sleep is even lighter then. The sentries on the battlements walk their rounds, their footsteps thudding dully through the stone. Every hour a call goes out to ensure they are awake. If a guard falls asleep at his post, the punishment is brutal. He might be thrown into the dungeon or, in severe cases, executed. The safety of everyone inside depends on those few men staying awake in the freezing wind and rain on the wall walk. You, lying on the floor of the hall, are subconsciously listening for the alarm bell. If it rings, there is no groggy waking up. You must grab your weapon and run. The transition from sleep to combat must be instantaneous. This underlying stress, this hypervigilance, is a constant stressor. You never truly relax. As the hours drag on, the temperature in the hall drops further. The stone walls have absorbed the cold of the night and are now radiating it back into the room. The breath of 50 sleepers creates a damp mist in the air. You wake up shivering, your joints stiff and aching. The cold has seeped through your cloak and into your bones. This is the bone ache that old soldiers complain of, the rheumatism that cripples people by the time they are 40. You curl into a tighter ball, trying to preserve your core heat. You press your back against the person sleeping next to you. In the daylight, social barriers keep you apart, but in the freezing dark, body heat is a shared resource. You borrow warmth from a stranger, and they borrow it from you. It is an intimacy born of necessity. Sometime in the deeply early morning, long before the sun rises, the castle begins to stir again. The bakers are the first up. They must heat the ovens to bake the day's bread. The sound of heavy iron doors clanging and wood being chopped echoes faintly through the stone. You shift on your thin pallet. Your hip is sore from the hard floor. Your skin itches from the flea bites. Your throat is dry and scratchy. You have survived another night in the keep. But as you open your eyes to the gray pre-dawn light filtering through the arrow slits, you realize that the cycle is about to begin all over again. The cold, the smell, the labor. There is no weekend, no holiday, just the relentless grind of survival. But before you start your day, there is a personal matter to attend to. You feel grime coated on your skin. You haven't bathed in weeks. In the modern world, a hot shower is a morning ritual. Here, it is a rare, dangerous, and complicated event. You look at your hands, stained with soot and grease. You decide you want to wash. But in a medieval castle, the simple act of getting clean is a massive logistical operation, and for most, it is simply not worth the effort.
The decision to bathe in a medieval castle is not a casual one. It is not a matter of simply turning a tap and stepping into a stream of hot, clean water. In 1250, a bath is a logistical event, a project that requires planning, manpower, and a significant expenditure of resources. For the lord of the castle, a full-body bath might happen perhaps once every few weeks, usually before a feast or a religious holiday. For you, living in the crowded barracks or the servants' quarters, it is an event that might happen only a few times a year. The rest of the time, you rely on spot cleaning,
washing your face and hands in a basin of cold water, scrubbing the grime from your neck with a rough cloth, and hoping that changing your linen undergarments will take care of the rest. But let us imagine that today is a special day. The order has been given for a bath. The sheer amount of labor this triggers is exhausting just to watch. First, the tub must be prepared. This is not a porcelain fixture. It is a large wooden barrel, cut in half or specially made by a cooper. It is brought into the Lord's chamber or set up near the kitchen fire to catch the warmth. The wood is rough and can give you splinters in the most sensitive places imaginable, so a large linen sheet is draped inside the tub. This bathing sheet is a crucial piece of technology. It protects your skin from the wood and also covers the top of the tub to keep the steam in. Then comes the water. There is no plumbing. Every drop of water must be drawn from the well in the courtyard, poured into buckets, and physically carried up the narrow, spiraling stone staircases. If the tub holds 40 gallons, that is hundreds of pounds of water being hauled up flight after flight of stairs by servants whose legs burn with the effort. Once the water is in the room, it must be heated. Sometimes stones are heated in the fire until they are red hot and then dropped into the water to bring it to temperature, filling the room with hissing steam. Other times, the water is heated in cauldrons in the kitchen and carried up bucket by steaming bucket. By the time the tub is full, the water at the bottom is already cooling. If you are the Lord, you step into this warm, cloth-lined barrel, and for a moment life is good. The heat soothes your aching muscles, stiff from riding in armor or sleeping on a drafty bed. You might have scented herbs, lavender, rose, or chamomile, thrown into the water to mask the smell of your body. A servant scrubs your back with a sponge or a handful of hay. This is the height of medieval luxury. But physics is cruel. The stone room sucks the heat from the water rapidly. You have a limited window of comfort before you are sitting in a lukewarm soup. But what if you are not the Lord? What if you are the third or fourth person in line? Water is precious, and heating it is expensive in terms of wood and labor. They do not change the water for every person. The Lord bathes first, then perhaps the lady, then the high-ranking guests, then the upper servants. By the time the water reaches the lower ranks, it is no longer clear. It is a gray, murky sludge, floating with the scum, sweat, and dead skin of the 5 people who bathed before you. There is a saying from this era, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." It comes from the very real fact that the water could become so opaque with dirt that you could literally lose a small child in it. For the common folk, bathing is less about getting clean and more about smearing someone else's filth onto your own skin. Now consider the soap. The gentle, perfumed bars you know do not exist. Medieval soap, or soft soap, is a semi-liquid, gelatinous substance made from animal fat, tallow, mixed with wood ash and lye. It smells of rancid mutton fat. It is highly caustic. If you leave it on your skin too long, it burns. It is excellent for stripping grease from pots and pans, but on human skin, it is harsh and drying. After a bath with this soap, your skin feels tight and itchy. Most people do not use soap on their bodies at all. They use it for laundry. For their skin, they might use plain water or rub themselves with oils to scrape off the dirt, much like the Romans did.
Since bathing the body is so difficult, the medieval obsession is not with clean skin, but with clean linen. This is the secret to medieval hygiene.
You wear a linen shirt or camise next to your skin, day and night. The theory is that the linen acts as a sponge, absorbing your sweat and oils. If you change your linen every day, and the wealthy do, you are considered clean, even if you haven't touched water in a month. The white linen showing at your neck and cuffs is a status symbol. It says, "I can afford to have this washed." And the washing of clothes is a massive, smelly industry within the castle. This is the domain of the laundresses, often considered the toughest women in the castle. They work in a dedicated area, often near the stream outside the walls or in a wash house. The process is known as bucking. The dirty linens are placed in a large wooden tub. But what is the detergent? It is lye, derived from wood ash. And to boost the cleaning power, to bleach the whites and cut through the grease, they use something else: stale urine. Yes, urine. It contains ammonia, which is a powerful cleaning agent. Chamber pots from around the castle are collected, and the contents are saved for the laundry. The laundresses stomp on the clothes in the vats, mixing the urine and ash into the fabric with their bare feet, much like crushing grapes for wine. The smell in the laundry house is eye-watering. After the soak, the clothes are hauled to the river to be rinsed. Imagine being a laundress in the dead of winter. You are kneeling by the freezing riverbank, your hands red and cracked from the icy water, scrubbing heavy wet wool and linen against stones to get the soap and urine out. It is back-breaking, freezing work that causes arthritis and chilblains. But when the linen dries in the sun or by the fire in winter, it is surprisingly white and fresh. This is the price of cleanliness, someone else's suffering. Let's move from the skin to the mouth. Smile at yourself in a mirror today, and you see straight white teeth. In the castle, a smile is often a gallery of horrors. Dental hygiene is primitive. There are no toothbrushes. To clean your teeth, you might take a piece of rough linen cloth and rub it vigorously against your gums and teeth to wipe away the plaque. If you are wealthy, you might use a tooth powder made from ground-up oyster shells, cuttlefish bone, or even powdered marble. It is abrasive, scrubbing away the dirt, but also stripping the enamel off your teeth over time. To freshen your breath, which is likely foul from the diet of meat and ale, you chew on fennel seeds, parsley, or cloves. But cavities are inevitable. There is no sugar in the diet yet. That comes later. But the bread is stone ground. This means tiny grit from the millstones ends up in the flour. Over a lifetime, chewing this bread grinds your teeth down flat. The nerves become exposed. An abscess forms. The pain is blinding, a throbbing agony that keeps you awake at night, pacing the cold stone floor. There is no dentist. There is no Novocaine. If the tooth has to come out, you go to the castle barber or the blacksmith, someone with a pair of pliers and a strong arm. The extraction is a nightmare. You are held down by two strong men. The dentist might give you a swig of strong wine or herbal concoction to dull the senses, but it does little against the trauma. He grips the rotting tooth with iron tongs. There is a crunch of bone, a scream, and a spray of blood. If the root breaks off, he has to dig it out. Infection is a very real possibility. A simple toothache can lead to sepsis and death within a week. This fear of pain and death hangs over everyone. When you look at the faces of the people in the castle, you notice that many of the older ones, those in their 40s, have sunken cheeks because they have lost most of their molars. Facial hair is another maintenance issue. For men, shaving is a perilous activity. The razors are made of iron, which does not hold an edge like modern steel. They are often dull and prone to rusting. There is no shaving foam, only water, and perhaps some oil or fat. A dry shave with a dull blade is excruciating, pulling the hair rather than cutting it. It leaves the skin raw and bloody. This is why so many men in the Middle Ages wear beards, not just for style or warmth, but because shaving is simply too painful and dangerous to do every day. If you do shave, you visit the barber, who is a man of many talents. He cuts hair, he pulls teeth, and he performs bloodletting. Ah, bloodletting. This brings us to the medical reality of the castle. You are feeling unwell. Perhaps the damp walls have given you a fever, or the bad food has unsettled your stomach. You visit the castle physician, or more likely, the leech book reader. The medical understanding of the time is based on the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness is believed to be an imbalance of these fluids. If you have a fever, you have too much blood, hot and wet. The cure? Remove the blood. The barber surgeon rolls up your sleeve. He does not wash his hands or the knife. He ties a tourniquet around your arm to make the vein bulge. Then he slices into the vein. The blood flows into a bowl. You watch your life force draining away, feeling lightheaded. He might take a pint or more. In your weakened state, suffering from malnutrition and illness, this loss of blood is often the final nail in the coffin. Yet this is the standard treatment for almost everything. If you have a headache, bleeding. Indigestion, bleeding. Melancholy, bleeding. Alternatively, they might use leeches. The physician reaches into a jar of water and pulls out a slimy, writhing black worm. He places it on your skin. You feel a prick as it bites, and then it begins to swell as it sucks your blood. You sit there, watching the creatures feed on you, hoping they are drawing out the bad humors. The castle is a place where the cure is often more terrifying than the disease. But let's step away from the pain for a moment and look at something else that dominates castle life: the wardrobe. Getting dressed in the morning is a heavy affair. You do not have zippers, Velcro, or elastic. Everything is tied with laces, buttons, or pins. You put on your brays, linen underpants that look like baggy shorts, then your hose, separate legs of wool that tie to your belt. There is no crotch in the hose. Your private parts are covered by the brays and the long tunic you wear over them. This split hose design is practical. It allows you to use the latrine without having to undress completely. You pull on your tunic, made of wool dyed in muted earth tones, browns, greens, and russets, using vegetable dyes. If you are a servant, your clothes are likely hand-me-downs, patched and repatched until the original fabric is barely visible. The wool is heavy and scratchy, but it is durable. It sheds water and keeps the wind out. Over the tunic, you might wear a surcoat or a hood. The chaperone, a hood with a long tail and a shoulder cape, is the most versatile garment you own. You can wear it up to cover your head or roll it down to act as a scarf. In a world without umbrellas, this wool hood is your only protection against the driving rain. As you finish dressing, you hear a commotion in the courtyard, the sound of hooves on cobblestones, the clatter of armor, and shouting. The gates are opening. A patrol is returning, or perhaps a messenger has arrived. The stagnant atmosphere of the castle is suddenly charged with energy. You leave the dark, smoky interior of the keep and step out into the gray light of the bailey to see what is happening. The outside world is coming to visit, and it rarely brings good news. You step out of the heavy oak door of the keep and into the bailey, the courtyard that serves as the lungs of the castle. The commotion you heard was a patrol of knights returning from the borderlands. This gives you a rare glimpse of the glamour of the Middle Ages, but up close, the shine is tarnished. The knights are not the gleaming figures of storybooks. Their armor is splattered with mud and rust. They look exhausted, slumping in their saddles. When they dismount, you hear the heavy, metallic clanking of their gear. They smell of wet metal, horse sweat, and old leather. A squire runs up to help a knight out of his helmet, revealing a face matted with beard hair and grime, marked by the red indentation of the helmet's padding. The courtyard itself is a sensory assault. If the keep was smoky and dark, the bailey is loud and chaotic. The ground beneath your feet is a treacherous mixture of mud, straw, and animal waste. There is no paved drainage system. When it rains, the bailey turns into a quagmire. You have to watch your step constantly to avoid sinking ankle-deep into a slurry of filth. Pattens, wooden overshoes that strap onto your boots, are a common sight here, lifting the wearer a few inches above the muck, but even they are often defeated by the depth of the sludge. To your left, you hear the rhythmic ringing of hammer on anvil. This is the smithy, the industrial heart of the castle. You walk towards the heat. The blacksmith is perhaps the most vital man in the castle after the lord. He doesn't just make swords. That is actually a small part of his job. He is responsible for the thousands of nails that hold the timber structures together, the hinges on the doors, the arrowheads for the archers, and most importantly, the horseshoes. The smell here is distinct, acrid coal smoke and the peculiar burning scent of hot iron searing into a horse's hoof. You watch as the smith works. He is covered in soot, his skin leathery from years of exposure to the forge's heat. He is shoeing a massive war horse, a destrier. The animal is nervous, its eyes wide, stamping its feet. One kick from this beast could shatter a man's chest. The smith works with a calm, practiced efficiency, ignoring the sparks that fly onto his leather apron. The heat coming from the forge is intense, a stark contrast to the damp chill of the rest of the courtyard. In the winter, the smithy is a popular gathering spot for servants looking to steal a moment of warmth, though the smith chases them away with a growl. Iron is expensive, and every scrap is accounted for. Nothing is wasted. If a tool breaks, it is melted down and reforged. Next to the smithy are the stables. In the hierarchy of castle life, the horses often live better than the peasants. A good war horse costs a fortune, equivalent to the lifetime earnings of a skilled craftsman. As you enter the stables, the smell of ammonia is overpowering, burning your nostrils. But look at the stalls. They are lined with fresh, clean straw, cleaner than the rushes on the floor of the great hall where you sleep. The horses are fed oats and grain, a diet that some of the poorer servants would envy during a famine. The grooms who work here sleep in the stalls with the animals. It is warm, thanks to the body heat of the large beasts, but it is dangerous. A startled horse in the night could crush a sleeping man. The grooms spend their days mucking out the stalls, grooming the coats of the animals until they shine, and checking for injuries. They are the mechanics of the medieval tank. If the lord's horse goes lame because of a stone in its shoe, the groom is responsible. Punishment for negligence is swift and physical, a flogging in the courtyard for everyone to see. Speaking of punishment, you turn your gaze to the center of the bailey. There, stark against the gray stone walls, stands the pillory and the stocks. These are not museum exhibits, they are active tools of social control. A man is currently locked in the stocks, his ankles clamped tight between the wooden boards. He sits in the mud, shivering. Perhaps he stole a loaf of bread, or maybe he was caught sleeping on guard duty. He is not just there to be uncomfortable, he is there to be shamed. The people passing by, his friends, his neighbors, jeer at him. Some throw rotten vegetables or handfuls of mud. In a small, closed community like a castle, the loss of reputation is a devastating blow. He is helpless, unable to wipe the filth from his face. He must endure the mockery until his time is up. But the stocks are for minor offenses. For serious crimes or for prisoners of war, there is a darker fate. You look towards the base of the keep, or perhaps a separate tower. There is a heavy iron-bound door that leads down. This is the dungeon. The word dungeon comes from the French donjon, meaning the keep itself, but over time it came to mean the dark prisons beneath. You are granted permission to look. You take a torch and descend the spiral stairs. The air changes instantly. It becomes cold, dead, and heavy with moisture. The walls glisten with slime. The smell is a mixture of mold, stale water, and human misery. You reach a cell. It is small, windowless, and utterly dark. When you take the torch away, the darkness is absolute. You cannot see your hand in front of your face. Prisoners here are often chained to the wall to prevent them from pacing. They sit in their own waste. There is no sanitation. Food is lowered down to them or pushed through a slot. Bread and water, just enough to keep them alive for questioning or ransom. The isolation is psychological torture. In the silence, the sound of dripping water becomes a maddening drumbeat. And then there are the rats. In the dungeon, the rats are bold. They know the prisoners are helpless. Many prisoners wake to find they have been bitten.
But there is something worse than the standard cell. In the floor of the dungeon, you see a circular grate. A guard lifts it, and you look down into the black abyss. This is the oubliette. The name comes from the French oublier, to forget. It is a bottle-shaped pit, narrow at the top and widening at the bottom. A prisoner is lowered down on a rope or simply dropped. Once they hit the floor, 10 or 20 feet below, the rope is pulled up and the grate is closed. There is no way out. The walls are too smooth to climb. There is no light, no ventilation. You are literally buried alive. The oubliette is where people are put to be forgotten. Sometimes they are left there to starve. Sometimes they are thrown scraps. Imagine the psychological horror of being in that pit. You might be standing on the bones of the previous occupant. You scream, but the thick stone walls swallow the sound. No one hears you. No one comes. You are erased from the world while you are still breathing. This is the ultimate expression of the Lord's power, the ability to make a human being vanish. Shaken by the darkness, you climb back up the stairs, gasping for the relatively fresh air of the bailey. You need to clear your head. You walk toward the curtain wall, the massive defensive perimeter of the castle. You climb the stairs to the wall walk or the ramparts. From here, you can see the countryside stretching out for miles. It looks peaceful. Green fields, a small village huddled near the castle walls, a ribbon of river. But don't be fooled. The view is strategic. The trees have been cut down for hundreds of yards around the castle, not for lumber, but to create a kill zone where enemies have no cover. The wind up here is ferocious. It whips through your woolen clothes, chilling you to the marrow. You pass a sentry on duty. He looks miserable. He has been standing here for hours, scanning the horizon. He is not looking for a beautiful sunset. He is looking for dust clouds that signal an approaching army. He leans on his spear, shifting his weight from foot to foot. If it rains, he gets wet. If it snows, he freezes. There is no shelter on the wall walk. His job is monotony, punctuated by sheer terror. You look closely at the battlements. You see the crenellations, the toothed pattern of stone. The solid parts are merlons and the gaps are crenels. The design allows an archer to step into the gap, fire an arrow, and then duck behind the stone for protection. But look down. Between the stones there are holes in the floor of the overhanging gallery. These are machicolations or murder holes. If an enemy reaches the base of the wall, the defenders don't just shoot at them, they drop things. And what do they drop? Boiling oil is the Hollywood myth. Oil is expensive and hard to heat in large quantities. No, they drop rocks, heavy, jagged stones that crush helmets and skulls. They pour boiling water, which causes horrific burns. They drop quicklime, calcium oxide, a chemical powder that burns skin on contact and can blind the attackers. Imagine a cloud of white dust falling on you that eats your eyes. And in a pinch, they dump the contents of the cesspit, buckets of accumulated human waste onto the attackers. The psychological and biological warfare of the Middle Ages is crude but effective. From your vantage point on the wall, you look down at the village outside the castle. It consists of wattle and daub huts with thatched roofs. The people there, the peasants, live a life that is in some ways harder, but in some ways freer than the soldiers inside. They work the land from dawn till dusk. They are the engine that feeds the castle. You see carts trundling towards the gatehouse, loaded with grain, firewood, and barrels of ale. The castle is a parasite. It produces nothing. It consumes everything. The peasants hand over a huge portion of their harvest to the Lord in exchange for protection. But when war comes, that protection means they must abandon their homes and crowd inside these walls, bringing their animals and their diseases with them, adding to the filth and the strain on resources. As you descend from the wall, you notice a group of children playing in the mud of the bailey. They are chasing a pig, laughing. It is a jarring sight in this grim fortress. Childhood in the Middle Ages is a fleeting concept. These children are small adults in training. By the age of 7, they will be working. The boys will be learning to fight or to farm. The girls will be learning to spin wool, cook, and manage a household. There is no adolescence. You are a child, and then, suddenly, you are a laborer. You look at their faces. They are dirty, yes, but there is something else. Many of them have visible sores or cloudy eyes. Infant mortality is terrifyingly high. A woman might give birth to 8 or 10 children, but only expect 2 or 3 to survive to adulthood. Disease, accidents, and malnutrition cull the weak ruthlessly. A simple cut can get infected and kill a healthy child in days. The parents love their children, but they have learned to guard their hearts. Death is a familiar visitor in the nursery. The sun is beginning to dip lower, casting long, distorted shadows across the courtyard. The bell in the castle chapel begins to toll. It is time for vespers, the evening prayers. Religion is the glue that holds this miserable world together. You follow the sound towards the chapel, seeking perhaps a moment of peace, or at least a place where the air smells of incense rather than dung. But even in the house of God, the hierarchy of the castle follows you. You step across the threshold into the castle chapel, and for a moment, the assault on your senses shifts. The air here is different. It is still cold, but the overwhelming stench of dung, rot, and unwashed bodies is masked by a new, powerful aroma: incense. Clouds of frankincense and myrrh hang in the air, burned not just for spiritual reasons, but for practical ones, to cover the smell of the congregation. In the medieval mind, bad smells are synonymous with disease and sin, miasma. So the sweet smoke of the chapel is literally the scent of holiness and safety. The chapel is likely the most beautiful room in the entire castle. In a world of gray stone, brown mud, and drab wool, the chapel is an explosion of color.
The walls are not bare, they are painted in vivid frescoes. But look closely at the art. It is not soothing abstract patterns. These are doom paintings. They depict the Last Judgment in terrifying detail. On one side, the saved are rising to heaven. On the other, naked sinners are being dragged by demons into the gaping maw of hell, a literal mouth full of teeth. They are being boiled in cauldrons, flayed alive, and eaten by monsters. You stare at these images. You cannot read the Bible because it is in Latin, and you are illiterate anyway. These paintings are your scripture. They tell you in graphic detail exactly what will happen to you if you disobey the church or the Lord. Fear is the currency here. The stained glass windows, if the Lord is wealthy enough to afford them, glow like jewels in the dying light. Blue, ruby red, and emerald green. When the sun hits them, they cast colored pools of light on the stone floor. To a peasant who lives in a mud hut, this interaction of light and color is nothing short of a miracle. It reinforces the idea that the king and the church have access to a power you cannot comprehend. You kneel on the hard stone. There are no pews. You stand or kneel for the entire service. The priest chants in Latin, a low droning sound that reverberates off the vaulted ceiling. You don't understand the words, but you know the rhythm. You bow your head, terrified of the eye of God, terrified of the demons on the wall, and terrified of the night that is coming. But not everyone in the castle is in the chapel. Some are in a place where prayer has run out. You leave the sanctuary and head towards a secluded part of the bailey, or perhaps a separate wing of the keep, the infirmary. If the chapel is the soul of the castle, the infirmary is its open wound. It is a long, low room filled with rows of wooden cots. The smell here hits you like a physical blow. It is the sickly sweet odor of gangrene, old blood, and human waste, unmasked by incense. This is where the sick and injured come, but it is not a hospital in the modern sense. There are no sterile instruments, no antibiotics, no morphine. It is essentially a waiting room for death. You walk past a cot where a soldier lies. He took an arrow to the leg a week ago. The arrow was pulled out, but a piece of the dirty cloth from his trousers was pushed into the wound by the arrowhead. Infection set in immediately. Now his leg is swollen to twice its normal size, turning black and green. He is delirious with fever, thrashing against the leather straps that bind him to the bed. The physician, who is likely a monk or a barber surgeon, stands over him. He is not holding a syringe, he is holding a saw. You watch, horrified, as the reality of medieval surgery unfolds. There is no anesthesia. The soldier is given a piece of leather to bite down on, and perhaps a sponge soaked in opium and vinegar is held under his nose, but it will do little against the agony of amputation. 4 strong men hold the soldier down. The surgeon works quickly, cutting through the rotting flesh. The scream that tears from the soldier's throat is primal, a sound that echoes off the stone walls and settles in your gut. Once the limb is severed, the bleeding must be stopped. The surgeon takes a glowing red-hot iron from a brazier of coals. He presses it against the raw stump. The sound of sizzling flesh and the smell of burning meat fill the room. The soldier passes out from the shock. If he is lucky, he will die of shock tonight. If he is unlucky, he will wake up to a life of infection and beggary. Further down the row, you see a woman coughing blood into a rag. Combustion, tuberculosis, is rampant. In the damp, smoky, crowded conditions of the castle, airborne diseases spread like wildfire. If one person gets the flu, everyone gets it. If one person gets the bloody flux, dysentery, the latrines become a vector of death. There is no isolation, no quarantine, until it is too late. The cure for her fever? The physician might apply a poultice of onions and garlic to her chest, or perhaps he will bleed her again, draining the little strength she has left. You notice a bowl of water on a side table. In it float strange, dark shapes, leeches. They are the go-to tool for everything. A man with a pounding headache has 2 of them attached to his temples, pulsing as they feed. The belief is that the pain is caused by bad blood pressing on the brain. The leeches are reducing the pressure. The man looks pale and clammy. The cure is slowly killing him.
The infirmary is also where the castle's elderly end up, though elderly is a relative term. If you survive childhood, war, and childbirth, you might live to be 40 or 50. By then, your body is wrecked. Your joints are swollen from arthritis caused by the cold and damp. Your teeth are gone. Your back is bent from years of manual labor. There is no retirement plan. If you cannot work, you are a mouth to feed that offers no return. If you have no family to care for you, you are moved here, to the edge of the community, to fade away. But the most terrifying word in the medieval vocabulary is not war, it is plague. Imagine a rumor starts. A merchant cart arrived yesterday from the coast. The driver was coughing. Today he is dead, covered in black boils the size of apples in his armpits and groin. Panic, cold and sharp, grips the castle. The gates are slammed shut. No one enters, no one leaves. The castle, designed to keep enemies out, now becomes a prison that locks the killer in. You are trapped inside these stone walls with the Black Death. It moves invisibly. You look at your friend across the dinner table. Is he pale? Is he sweating? You recoil from his touch. The communal nature of castle life, the shared cups, the shared beds, the shared latrines, becomes a death sentence. The rats that run over your face at night are carrying the fleas that carry the bacteria. You cannot see the enemy, you cannot fight it with a sword, and you cannot pray it away. Within days, the sounds of the castle change. The industry of the blacksmith stops. The laughter of the children ceases. The only sound is the tolling of the bell and the creaking of the death cart. Bodies are piled in the courtyard because the grave diggers are dead. The smell is apocalyptic. The Lord shuts himself in his tower, burning fires of aromatic woods, refusing to see anyone. But the plague enters through the window with the flea on a rat. In the end, the castle does not save him. The grim reality is that during a plague, the peasant in the open field has a better chance of survival than the lord in his crowded fortress. But let us pull back from the plague scenario to the normal daily grind. You leave the infirmary, shaken by the sights and sounds of primitive medicine. The sun has set completely now. The castle is wrapped in night. You return to the great hall. The evening meal is over. Now it is time for entertainment. You might expect a bard singing romantic songs of chivalry, of Lancelot and Guinevere. And yes, sometimes that happens. But the medieval sense of humor and entertainment is often much darker, much crueler. The Lord calls for the fool. The jester, or fool, is not just a guy in a funny hat. He is often a person with physical deformities or learning disabilities, a natural fool, who is kept by the Lord for amusement. He is poked, prodded, and laughed at. He trips and falls, and the hall roars with laughter. It is a cruel spectacle. Alternatively, the entertainment might be bear baiting. A bear, caught in the wild, is chained to a stake in the courtyard or even brought into the hall. Packs of dogs are unleashed upon it. The dogs bite and tear at the bear. The bear swipes and crushes the dogs. The audience bets on the outcome, cheering at the blood and the violence. To a modern eye, it is horrific animal cruelty. To the medieval eye,
It is a thrilling sport, a release of the tension built up by the harshness of their own lives. The torches flicker low, the shadows lengthen. The alcohol, thick, strong wine for the nobles, watery ale for you, has done its work. The noise in the hall softens into a dull murmur. People are finding their spots on the floor again. The cycle of the day is closing. But there is one more job that must be done before the castle sleeps. The gong farmer. This is the worst job in the medieval world, bar none. Under cover of darkness, while others rest, the gong farmer and his team arrive. They must clean out the cesspits. Remember the garderobes, the toilets that empty into pits at the base of the walls? Those pits fill up. Someone has to empty them. The gong farmer descends into the pit, often waist-deep in human excrement that has been festering for months. The fumes alone can kill, methane and hydrogen sulfide. They shovel the waste into buckets, haul it up, and cart it away to be used as fertilizer in the fields. They work at night because the smell is too offensive for the day. These men are social outcasts, forced to live on the fringes of the village, permanently stained by the stench of their profession. Yet without them, the castle would become uninhabitable within a year. They are the silent, stinking heroes of castle hygiene. You lie down on your pallet, pulling your scratchy wool cloak over your head. You can hear the distant clatter of the gong farmer's cart leaving the castle. You try not to think about it. You try not to think about the soldier screaming in the infirmary, or the doom paintings in the chapel, or the rat scratching in the straw near your ear. You are exhausted. Your body aches from the hard labor. Your belly is full of heavy bread. You close your eyes, seeking the oblivion of sleep. But sleep is a vulnerable time. In the medieval mind, the soul leaves the body when you dream, and in the dark corners of the room, the devil is waiting.
The night passes, but the dawn brings no warmth. We must now talk about the season that defines the true misery of castle life: winter. In the movies, winter is a scenic backdrop of snow-dusted turrets and fur cloaks. In reality, it is a survival situation that lasts for months. A stone castle is effectively a giant refrigerator. The thick walls that keep the heat out in summer also keep the solar heat out in winter. Once the stone gets cold, deeply, thoroughly cold, it stays that way. You wake up and your breath is a cloud of steam. The condensation from the breathing of 50 people in the great hall has risen during the night, hit the freezing stone ceiling, and frozen there. As the room warms slightly with the morning activity, it begins to rain inside, drips of cold, dirty water falling from the rafters. The tapestries on the walls are damp to the touch. The floor, that mixture of rushes and filth, is hard and frosty. You are now entering the period of the long boredom. During the harvest, everyone is busy, but in the deep winter, the castle is locked down. The roads are impassable due to mud and snow. No messengers come, no merchants arrive. You are stuck with the same group of people, day in and day out, trapped in a dark, smoky box. Cabin fever sets in. Arguments break out over nothing: a stolen piece of bread, a look that lingered too long, a space by the fire. Violence is simmering just below the surface. To pass the time, people gamble. Dice games are ubiquitous. You play with dice carved from bone or antler. You bet your rations, your chores, or even the clothes on your back. The church condemns gambling, calling it the devil's prayer. But in the boredom of the keep, the rattle of dice is the soundtrack of the afternoon.
Chess and backgammon are for the nobility, played on boards of inlaid wood, but the tension is the same. It is a desperate attempt to distract the mind from the cold and the hunger. And the hunger changes in winter. The fresh food is long gone. You are now eating stockfish, cod that has been dried until it is as hard as wood. You have to beat it with a hammer before you can boil it. It tastes of salt and nothing else. The vegetables in the pottage are shriveled turnips and old onions. Scurvy begins to appear. Your gums bleed, your old wounds reopen, and you feel a constant dragging lethargy. The Lord might have a stash of dried fruits or spices to ward it off, but you do not. But the winter is just a natural siege. What happens when the threat is human? Let us shift the scene to the scenario the castle was built for, but which every inhabitant dreads most, the siege. Imagine it is spring again. The mud has dried. You are on the wall walk, and you see it, a glint of metal on the horizon, not a patrol, but a river of steel. An army is coming. The alarm bell rings, a frantic clanging sound that sends adrenaline spiking through your veins. The gates are slammed shut and barred with massive beams of oak. The drawbridge is winched up with the groan of heavy chains. You are now sealed in. A siege is not usually a fast, dramatic battle. It is a slow, agonizing, staring contest. The enemy army surrounds the castle, cutting off all supply lines. They set up camp just out of bowshot. They don't need to attack, they just need to wait. They know inside you have a finite amount of food and water. The clock starts ticking. The first few weeks are bearable. Morale is high. You check the stores. The granaries are full. The barrels of ale are stacked high. But then the psychological warfare begins. The enemy builds trebuchets, massive counterweight catapults, visibly, slowly, right in front of you. You watch them assembling the beams day by day. You know what is coming. Then the bombardment starts. They hurl massive stones weighing hundreds of pounds. When they hit the curtain wall, the impact shakes the ground you are standing on. It sounds like a thunderclap. But they don't just throw stones, they throw fire, pots of Greek fire or pitch that ignite the thatched roofs of the workshops in the bailey. Panic ensues as you run to put out the flames with buckets of sand because water is too precious to waste on fire. And then they throw the other things, the heads of your messengers who were caught trying to sneak out, or worse, dead animals, bloated cows, rotting pigs, dead horses. They launch them over the walls into the courtyard. The bodies burst on impact, spreading putrid fluids and disease. This is biological warfare. The smell becomes unbearable. You have to clean it up, but the flies are already swarming. The enemy is trying to start a plague inside your walls. As the months drag on, the food dwindles. The rationing begins. First, you cut out the midday meal. Then the evening meal becomes half a loaf of bread. Then a quarter. The useless mouths are the first to suffer. These are the servants who cannot fight, the elderly, the children. In a cold calculation of survival, the Lord might order them expelled. The gates open a crack, and they are pushed out. But the enemy won't let them pass. They are trapped in the no-man's land between the castle walls and the enemy lines, starving to death in plain sight of their families on the walls. It is a horror that breaks the spirit of the defenders. Inside, the diet shifts. The pigs and chickens were eaten weeks ago. Now you look at the horses. The destriers, the Lord's pride and joy, are slaughtered. Horse meat is sweet and tough, but it is protein. When the horses are gone, you look at the dogs. The hunting hounds that slept by the fire are now dinner. And when the dogs are gone, You look at the rats. The very creatures you hunted are now the only source of fresh meat. A rat, skinned and roasted, costs a fortune in the black market of the besieged castle. But the greatest terror is not hunger, it is thirst. A human can survive weeks without food, but only days without water. If the castle relies on a well, you pray the water table doesn't drop. If the castle relies on cisterns that catch rainwater, you pray for rain. But the enemy knows this too. If they can find the source of your spring outside the walls, they will poison it or divert it. If the water runs out, the surrender is immediate. You find yourself rationing sips of vinegar or stale wine, your tongue swelling in your mouth, your mind hallucinating from dehydration. There is another danger, one that comes from below, mining. The enemy brings in sappers, miners who dig a tunnel under the castle walls. You can't see them, but sometimes, if you press your ear to the ground in the cellar, you can hear them. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The sound of pickaxes eating away at the earth beneath your feet. They prop up the tunnel with wooden beams, fill it with pig fat and brushwood, and set it on fire. The supports burn, the tunnel collapses, and the massive stone tower above it crumbles into the earth, creating a breach.
The fear of the mine is constant. To counter it, you dig your own tunnels, countermines. You dig blindly into the dark earth, hoping to intercept them. If you break through into their tunnel, a vicious, claustrophobic fight erupts underground, in the pitch black, with knives and pickaxes, men screaming in a suffocating tube of dirt. It is a nightmare war within a war. But let us assume the walls hold. The siege drags into winter. Now you have the cold, the hunger, the disease, and the enemy. You are a skeleton in armor. You conserve energy by moving as little as possible. The great hall is silent. No one has the energy to talk. You sit wrapped in your cloak, waiting for the end, either death or relief. Eventually, a deal is made, or relief arrives, or the enemy gives up and goes home for the harvest. The gates open. The silence of the siege is broken. But you are not the same person. You have seen the depths of human desperation. You have eaten things no human should eat. You have watched your friends waste away. The castle, your home, feels less like a fortress and more like a tomb that you happen to survive. Recovery is slow. The first fresh meal, a simple bowl of vegetable broth, shocks your shrunken stomach, causing cramps. The fresh air feels too thin, too clean. You have to relearn how to live without the constant shadow of death. But life in the Middle Ages allows little time for trauma. There is work to be done. The walls must be repaired. The fields trampled by the enemy army must be replowed. The cycle restarts. Let's move away from the military aspect now and look at something more mystical, yet equally gritty, the alchemist. Somewhere in a tower of the castle, or perhaps in a damp cellar, lives a man who claims he can change the nature of reality. The alchemist is often a figure of suspicion, tolerated by the Lord because he promises the ultimate prize, turning lead into gold. In a world of scarcity, the promise of infinite wealth is too tempting to ignore. You walk past his door. The smell is different here. Sulfur, mercury, and strange acidic fumes that tickle your throat. The room is cluttered with glass vessels, alembics and retorts, bubbling with colored liquids. It looks like magic, but it is the messy, dangerous birth of chemistry. The alchemist is likely suffering from heavy metal poisoning. His teeth are loose, his hands shake, the hatter's shakes from mercury exposure, and his skin is gray.
He is slowly killing himself in pursuit of the philosopher's stone. He mixes urine with sand, distilling it to create phosphorus that glows in the dark, a miracle to the medieval eye, but essentially just processed waste. He is searching for the elixir of life, yet he looks closer to death than anyone else. He also serves as the castle's pharmacist. If you have a strange ailment that the barber surgeon can't fix with bloodletting, you come here. He might give you a draught containing arsenic or antimony. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger is a literal medical strategy. Often, the cure is a purge, inducing violent vomiting or diarrhea to cleanse the body. You drink the foul-tasting potion and spend the next 2 days in agony, believing that the physical violence being done to your insides is the sickness leaving you. The alchemist represents the medieval struggle to understand the world. They know that things happen, fire burns, acid eats metal, bodies decay, but they don't know why. So they fill the gaps with mysticism, astrology, and religion. They believe the position of Mars affects the healing of a wound. They believe a sapphire worn around the neck cures eye diseases. It is a world where the boundary between science and magic is non-existent, and you are the test subject for their experiments. As you leave the alchemist's tower, you notice the sun is setting again, but tonight is different. Tonight is a feast. The feast is the highlight of the castle calendar. It is a display of power, gluttony, and excess that stands in contrast to the daily gruel. The hall is transformed. The dirty rushes are swept out, finally, and replaced with fresh green herbs, meadowsweet and mint, that release a pleasant scent when crushed. The tapestries are beaten to remove the dust. The best beeswax candles, which burn bright and clean, replace the smoky tallow ones. You are not sitting at the high table, of course, but even from the lower benches, the spectacle is overwhelming. The food is not just food, it is theater. The cooks have prepared subtleties, elaborate sculptures made of sugar and marzipan, shaped like castles, ships, or mythical beasts. They bring out a peacock, roasted but then redressed in its own skin and feathers, with its beak gilded in gold leaf. It looks alive. But looking closer, you see the strain this puts on the castle's economy. This one meal consumes the resources of months. The peasants outside might be on the brink of starvation, but inside, the lord must show his wealth to maintain his authority. You eat venison, swan, and lampreys, eel-like creatures considered a delicacy. The wine flows freely. For a few hours, the cold, the filth, and the fear are forgotten in a haze of alcohol and grease. But notice the etiquette, or lack thereof. People throw bones over their shoulders onto the floor. They wipe their hands on the tablecloths, if there are any, or on pieces of bread. Belching is rampant. It is a chaotic, loud, messy affair. And as the night wears on, and the wine takes hold, the veneer of chivalry often cracks. Brawls break out. Knives are drawn. The line between a celebration and a riot is very thin in a room full of armed, drunk men. You watch the lord at the high table. He is laughing, his face flushed, but you know that tomorrow the reality returns. The feast is a temporary illusion. The candles will burn down. The food will be eaten. And the cold stone walls will still be there, waiting.
The morning after the feast is a grim affair. The great hall, which last night was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of roasted meats, now smells of stale wine, old sweat, and the sour reek of vomit in the corners. The rushes on the floor are in a sorry state, matted down with grease and refuse. But there is no time to nurse a hangover. The tables are cleared away,
and the hall undergoes yet another transformation. Today, it is not a dining room or a dormitory, it is a court of law. In the medieval world, the lord of the castle is not just a landlord or a military commander. He is the judge, jury, and often the executioner. If you live on his land, you are subject to his laws. This is the manorial court. You watch as the lord takes his seat on the dais. He looks tired, perhaps nursing a headache from the wine, which makes his temper short. This is bad news for the accused standing before him. Medieval justice is swift, brutal, and often surprisingly focused on money. Imprisonment is rare as a punishment because keeping a prisoner in a dungeon is expensive. You have to feed them and guard them. The lord prefers fines. A peasant is dragged forward. His crime? He was caught collecting fallen branches from the lord's forest to heat his hut. This sounds innocent to modern ears, but here it is theft. The forest belongs to the lord. Every stick, every leaf, every rabbit. The peasant is fined 3 silver pennies, a crushing sum that might force his family to go hungry for a month. Next is a dispute between 2 villagers. One accuses the other of letting his pigs root in the wrong field. There are no lawyers, no forensic evidence. It is word against word. The lord listens, bored. He might ask the neighbors to vouch for the character of the accused. This is compurgation. If 12 people swear you are innocent, you might go free. If not, you pay. But for more serious crimes, the methods of determining guilt get darker. Consider the ordeal. Though the church is beginning to frown on this by the mid-13th century, the mindset remains. If the judge cannot decide, they let God decide. The accused might be forced to hold a red-hot iron bar and walk 3 paces. The wound is bandaged. 3 days later, it is checked. If it is healing cleanly, God has protected the innocent. If it is infected, which, given the sanitation, is highly likely, you are guilty. The punishment follows immediately. And the punishments are designed to be visible. The castle relies on fear to maintain order. If a woman is accused of being a scold, gossiping, or speaking out against authority, she might be forced to wear the scold's bridle. It is an iron cage that fits over the head with a metal bit that goes into the mouth and presses down the tongue, sometimes with a spike to prevent speaking. She's then led through the bailey on a chain like a dog, humiliated before the entire community. For theft, you might lose a hand. For poaching, you might be blinded. You see a man in the courtyard with a slit nose or cropped ears. He is a walking billboard for the Lord's justice, a warning to everyone else. The cruelty is the point. It is a society without a police force, so the terror of punishment must be strong enough to deter crime. Speaking of the forest, let us step outside the walls again. To you, a forest is a place of nature and beauty. To the medieval peasant, the forest is a place of fear and temptation. It is known as the greenwood, but it is not free. It is strictly regulated by forest law, which is hated by everyone. The deer, the boar, and the timber are reserved for the nobility. But you are invited to join the hunt. This is the favorite pastime of the nobility, but do not mistake it for a relaxing hobby. It is military training. The lord and his knights ride out on their war horses, armed with spears and bows. They are hunting a wild boar. A boar is a terrifying creature, massive, fast, and armed with razor-sharp tusks that can rip a horse's belly open or sever a man's femoral artery. The hunt is loud. Horns blow, dogs bay, and men shout. They corner the beast. The dogs go in first, often getting mauled. Then a knight dismounts to finish it with a spear. It is violent and bloody. The adrenaline is high. This is how they practice for war, learning to ride through rough terrain, to coordinate a team, and to kill without hesitation. Once the animal is dead, the unmaking begins. This is a ritualistic butchery performed right there on the grass. There is a specific way to cut up a deer or boar. Specific cuts of meat are given to specific people based on rank. The dogs get the entrails. The lord gets the choice cuts. If you butcher it wrong, you are mocked. It is a ceremony of death.
But the forest holds other dangers. Outlaws are real. These are men who have been declared wolf's head by the law. This means they are no longer considered human. Anyone can kill them on sight without penalty. They live in the deep woods, surviving by poaching and robbing travelers. If you are a merchant traveling to the castle, the forest is a gauntlet. You travel in convoys, armed, eyeing every shadow in the trees. The romantic idea of Robin Hood fighting for the poor is a nice story, but the reality is usually desperate men with knives who will slit your throat for your boots. Back inside the castle, while the men hunt, let us look at the lives of the women. The lady of the castle lives a life that is often misunderstood. She is not just sitting around doing embroidery. She is the CEO of a major corporation. When the lord is away at war or court, which is often, she runs everything. She manages the accounts, oversees the harvest, organizes the defense if the castle is attacked, and settles legal disputes. She must be tough, intelligent, and ruthless. However, she is also property. Her marriage was likely arranged when she was a child. She is a political pawn used to cement an alliance between two families. Love does not enter the equation. She might be 14 years old, married to a man of 40. Her primary duty, above all management, is to produce an heir. And this brings us to the most dangerous battlefield of the Middle Ages, childbirth. In the year 1250, entering the birthing chamber is statistically as dangerous as entering a battle. When the lady goes into labor, the room is sealed. The windows are shuttered and covered with heavy tapestries to keep out drafts and evil spirits. The room is hot, dark, and airless. Men are strictly forbidden. It is a female domain, presided over by midwives. There are no doctors here. The medical knowledge is a mix of folk wisdom and superstition. The midwife might place a knife under the bed to cut the pain. She might open all the cupboards and doors in the room to open the way for the baby. She might give the mother a potion of vinegar and sugar, or place a warm poultice on her belly. But if something goes wrong, if the baby is breech or the cord is wrapped, there is very little she can do. You stand outside the heavy oak door. You can hear the screams. They go on for hours, sometimes days. Inside, the scene is frantic. The mother is exhausted, dehydrated, and terrified. If the baby is stuck, the methods to remove it are horrific and often fatal for the child, the mother, or both. Infection, childbed fever, is a constant killer. A woman might survive the birth only to die a week later from sepsis because the midwife's hands were unwashed. If the lady dies, the castle mourns, but the machinery of dynasty moves on. The lord will remarry quickly. He needs sons. The mortality rate is so high that he needs an heir and a spare, and preferably a third just in case. It is a brutal biological imperative. If the baby survives, it is swaddled tightly in linen bands. The belief is that babies are soft and malleable, so they must be strapped straight so their limbs grow correctly. They are immobilized like little mummies. Then comes the wet nurse. A noblewoman rarely breastfeeds her own child. It is considered uncouth and interferes with her ability to conceive again quickly.
So, a peasant woman who has recently given birth is brought in. She gives her milk to the young lord, while her own baby is fed animal milk or pap, bread soaked in water, often leading to the peasant child's death from malnutrition. The survival of the noble infant is purchased with the life of the peasant infant. Let's shift from the beginning of life to the education of the mind, or the lack thereof. You, as a typical inhabitant of the castle, cannot read. Literacy is a superpower possessed only by the clergy and a few wealthy nobles. You live in an oral culture. Everything you know, history, law, religion, you have heard, not read. This makes you incredibly reliant on authority figures. If the priest says the Bible says X, you have to believe him. You cannot check. This lack of scientific knowledge leaves a vacuum that is filled with superstition. You are constantly navigating a world of invisible rules. You never pass someone on the stairs without saying a blessing. You never spill salt without throwing a pinch over your shoulder to blind the devil. If a hare crosses your path, it is bad luck. If an owl hoots during the day, someone will die. You wear amulets. A pouch around your neck might contain a dried toad, a piece of parchment with a prayer scrawled on it, or a saint's relic, which is probably just a chicken bone sold to you by a con artist. You believe in changelings, that fairies might steal a healthy baby and replace it with a sickly one. If a child has a disability, it is often blamed on supernatural forces or the mother's sin. This fear extends to the night sky. Comets are not astronomical events, they are omens of doom, signaling the death of a king or the coming of a plague. Eclipses are terrifying interruptions of the divine order. You live in a world where the supernatural is not a story, it is as real as the stone walls around you. Magic is real to you, witches are real, and the devil is constantly plotting to snare your soul. Now, let's look at the castle's economy again. We talked about the blacksmith, but we missed the fletcher and the bower. In 1250, the longbow is becoming the weapon of mass destruction. The bower shapes the wood. Yew is the best, imported from Spain or Italy because English yew is too knotty. He works the wood with infinite patience, creating a D-shaped profile that can withstand immense tension. The fletcher makes the arrows. He uses goose feathers for the fletching. Thousands of geese are plucked alive to supply the castle's armory. The arrowheads are made by the smith, but the glue used to attach the feathers, it is made from boiled bluebells or fish skin. The industry required to keep a castle stocked with tens of thousands of arrows is immense. Every time an archer looses an arrow in practice, he is firing money into the air. He has to go and retrieve it. You watch the archers practicing in the butts, the archery range. They are not aiming at targets, they are aiming at clout, a marker at a great distance. They are training for volume fire. The physical deformation of these men is visible. Drawing a 100-pound warbow deforms the skeleton over time. Their left arms are thicker, their shoulders hunched, their spines twisted. They are shaped by their weapons. As the sun begins to set on another day, you notice a strange group arriving at the gates. They are not knights, nor merchants, they are pilgrims. Hospitality is a sacred duty in the Middle Ages. The castle must provide shelter to travelers, especially religious ones. These pilgrims are walking to a holy shrine, perhaps Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela, to seek a cure of an illness or to do a penance for a sin. They wear distinctive badges on their hats. They bring news from the outside world, but they also bring lice and sickness. They are ushered into the great hall to sleep on the floor with the rest of you. They tell stories of the road, of bandits, of miracles, of strange lands where dog-headed men live,
a common medieval belief. You listen, eyed wide. Your world is usually limited to 10 miles around the castle. These travelers are your internet, your television, your window into a wider, stranger world. But tonight, the atmosphere is tense. The Lord has received a message. The king is coming. A royal visit is not a joyous occasion. It is a disaster. The king travels with a retinue of hundreds, courtiers, soldiers, servants, horses, dogs. They are a swarm of locusts. They will eat the castle dry in 3 days. The Lord is in a panic. The servants are whipped into a frenzy of cleaning. The best wine is brought up from the cellar. The castle is about to be tested, not by war, but by politics and gluttony.
The king's arrival is a spectacle, but for the castle, it is a catastrophe. The gates are thrown open, and the royal retinue pours in like a floodwater of silk, steel, and entitlement. You might think the presence of the monarch would bring order, but it brings chaos. The king does not travel alone. He travels with the government. His clerks, his judges, his advisors, his guards, his huntsmen, and his jesters all need to be fed and housed. The castle is suddenly bursting at the seams. The population has tripled overnight. The great hall is so crowded that people are sleeping on the tables, under the tables, and in the window recesses. The stench of humanity, already bad, becomes unbearable. The latrines cannot cope. The gong farmers work overtime, but the cesspits overflow. In the courtyard, temporary tents and wooden shacks are thrown up to house the lower-ranking servants of the king, turning the bailey into a shantytown of mud and noise. But the real horror is purveyance. This is the royal right to seize goods for the king's household at a fixed price, or often for no price at all, just a wooden tally stick promising future payment that may never come. The king's purveyors fan out into the countryside like locusts. They take the peasant's best cow. They take the grain reserved for next year's planting. They take the carts and the oxen to carry the royal luggage, leaving the farmer with no way to plow his field. Inside the castle, the stores are raided. The salted meat you were saving for winter? Gone. The ale? Drunk by the king's archers. The firewood? Burned to keep the king's chambers toasty while you shiver in the drafty hall. You watch as the resources of the castle are consumed with terrifying speed. The king stays for 3 days. By the time he leaves, the larder is empty. The granary is swept clean. The castle is stripped bare. When the royal dust finally settles and the last wagon trundles out of the gate, the silence returns. But it is a desperate silence. The Lord is now in debt. The peasants are on the brink of starvation, and winter is coming. This is the king's evil. Not a disease, but the economic devastation left in the wake of majesty. This scarcity leads to a new horror, ergotism. With the good grain gone, the bakers are forced to use whatever is left. Often, this is rye that has been stored in damp conditions. You notice that the flour has a pinkish tint, or that the bread has dark black streaks in it. You are hungry, so you eat it anyway. You dip the dark, hard crust into your watery pottage and swallow. A few days later, the symptoms begin. It starts with a tingling in your fingers and toes, then a burning sensation, as if your limbs are being held over a fire. This is why it is called St. Anthony's fire. The fungus in the rye, ergot, is a vasoconstrictor. It restricts blood flow to your extremities. Slowly, your fingers and toes turn black. Gangrene sets in. They die and wither. In severe cases, a peasant might break off a toe while taking off his boot, painlessly, because the nerve endings are dead. But ergot does something else. It contains lysergic acid, the base component of LSD. As the gangrene eats your body, the hallucinations eat your mind.
You see demons in the shadows. You hear the voice of God or the devil. You feel imaginary insects crawling under your skin. The castle becomes a house of madness. People are screaming, dancing wildly in the courtyard, or convulsing in seizures. To the medieval mind, this is not food poisoning. It is witchcraft. It is demonic possession. The priest is called. He splashes holy water on the victims, exorcising demons that are actually caused by moldy bread. You watch your neighbors losing their minds and their limbs, believing that God is punishing the castle for some secret sin. The fear is palpable. You look at your own piece of bread. Is it poisoned? You have no choice. You have to eat. Let's move from the madness of the mind to the breaking of the body, the stonemasons. Even in the midst of famine, the work of the castle never truly stops. A castle is a machine of war, and it requires constant maintenance. The master mason is the architect and engineer. He is one of the few men who is paid well and respected. But for the common laborers, the work is lethal. You watch the construction of a new tower. The scaffolding is made of wooden poles lashed together with ropes. It creaks and sways in the wind. There are no safety harnesses, no hard hats. Men are walking on narrow planks 60 feet above the stone courtyard. A slip means death, and slips happen. A sudden gust of wind, a loose rope, a moment of dizziness from hunger, and a man falls. His body hits the stones with a sickening thud. The work pauses for a moment. A prayer is said. The body is dragged away, and the next man climbs up. The most terrifying piece of technology on the site is the tread wheel crane. It looks like a giant hamster wheel made of wood mounted at the top of the tower. 2 men walk inside the wheel, their weight turning the axle to winch up heavy blocks of stone. Imagine being the man in the wheel. You are walking endlessly, but going nowhere. You are high in the air, exposed to the rain and wind. If the rope snaps, the counterweight of the stone is gone, and the wheel spins out of control, tossing you around inside like a rag doll until your bones are shattered. Or, if the load is too heavy and the brake fails, the wheel spins backwards, dragging the stone down and the men with it.
Down on the ground, the stone cutters are breathing in death. They spend their days chiseling sandstone or limestone. A fine white dust hangs in the air around them. They breathe it in, hour after hour, year after year. It coats their lungs. They develop a hacking cough. Stonecutter's lung, silicosis, ensures that few of them live past 40. They are turning to stone from the inside out. But the castle walls are beautiful, smooth, and imposing. The suffering of the builders is hidden in the mortar. Let's step away from the noise of construction to the quiet regulation of time. You do not own a watch. You do not have a clock on the wall. In fact, you probably don't know exactly how old you are. Time in the castle is not measured in minutes or seconds. It is measured in prayers. The day is divided by the canonical hours, marked by the ringing of the chapel bell. Matins, midnight. The monks and the pious rise to pray in the dark. Prime, sunrise, around 6 a.m., the workday begins. Terce, mid-morning, around 9 a.m. Sext, noon, the main meal of the day. Nuns, mid-afternoon, 3 p.m. Vespers, sunset, work ends. Compline, bedtime. Your entire existence is regulated by that bell. When it rings, you eat. When it rings, you work. When it rings, you pray. You are a cog in a machine driven by the church. In the summer, the hours are longer because the daylight is longer. In the winter, the workday shrinks, but the cold nights stretch out endlessly. This fluid time can be disorienting. You live in a permanent now, connected to the rhythm of the sun and the bell, rather than a numerical grid. But time is running out for someone in the castle. A death has occurred, not a violent one, but a natural one. The unction has been performed, the last rites. Now the rituals of the dead begin. The body is washed, usually by the women of the household. It is wrapped in a simple linen shroud. Coffins are a luxury for the rich. Most people are buried in the shroud, directly in the earth. But before the burial, there is a wake. The body is laid out in the main room of the house or the hall. Candles are lit around it. And then enters one of the most macabre figures of medieval history, the Sin Eater. This is a local outcast, usually a beggar or a man believed to have a dark soul. The family of the deceased places a loaf of bread on the chest of the dead man. They believe that the bread absorbs the sins of the dead man, his unconfessed lies, his lusts, his angers. The Sin Eater is called in. He stands over the body. The room is silent, filled with grieving relatives. He picks up the bread from the cold chest of the dead man. He eats it. He drinks a bowl of ale passed over the corpse. By doing so, he literally eats the sins, taking them upon his own soul, so that the dead man can go to heaven. The family is relieved. Their loved one is clean. But the Sin Eater is reviled. He is paid a few coins and then chased away, stoned or shouted at. He is now carrying the spiritual filth of the village. He lives in isolation, feared and hated, growing heavier with the sins of others with every meal. It is a grim transaction, spiritual salvation purchased with human dignity. The body is taken to the churchyard, but space is limited. The graveyard has been used for centuries. The sexton, gravedigger, often digs up old bones to make room for the new body. These old bones are not treated with horror. They are simply stacked in a charnel house, a bone shed, or arranged in patterns on the walls of the crypt. Memento mori. Remember, you will die. You walk past a stack of skulls on your way to Sunday Mass. Death is not hidden in a sanitized hospital. It is right there, staring at you with hollow eyes. As you walk back from the funeral, the wind picks up. A storm is coming. The castle prepares to batten down the hatches. The shutters are closed. The tapestries sway against the walls. The draft is not just air, it is a ghost. The medieval castle is a place of profound superstition. You sit by the fire, and the elders tell stories. They don't tell fairy tales of princes. They tell of the wild hunt, a ghostly procession of phantom huntsmen and hounds that rides across the sky and storms, collecting souls. They tell of revenants, corpses that climb out of their graves to harass the living because they were not buried properly. You listen, and the howling of the wind outside sounds exactly like a pack of spectral dogs. You look at the shadows dancing on the wall. Is that just a shadow, or is it a demon waiting for you to fall asleep? You clutch your amulet. The line between reality and the supernatural is non-existent here. You live in a haunted house. But the storm brings something else. Damp. The roof of the great hall is leaking. The thatch on the outer buildings is sodden. The water drips relentlessly. Drip, drip, drip. It lands on your bed. It lands in your food. Everything you own is damp.
Your wool clothes never truly dry, they smell of wet sheep and mildew. The leather of your shoes turns green with mold. The wooden beams of the ceiling are slowly decaying. The iron nails are rusting. The castle is in a constant state of slow motion collapse, fighting a losing battle against the elements. And with the damp comes the cough. Everyone in the castle coughs. It is the background noise of existence. From the lord to the scullery maid, everyone has a chest cold that lasts from October to April. The smoke from the fire, the damp in the walls, the dust from the rushes, it destroys the lungs. You hear the deep rattling cough of the old men, a sound that signals the end is near. There is no cough syrup. You might drink a hot posset of ale and spices, but mostly you just endure it until spring or until you stop breathing.
The storm has passed, leaving the castle dripping and cold. But in a quiet corner of the complex, perhaps in a tower room or an attached monastery, there is a different kind of labor happening. It is a silent, painstaking struggle against the erosion of time. This is the scriptorium. You might imagine a cozy library with a roaring fire. The reality is a freezing workshop. Fire is forbidden here. A stray spark could destroy centuries of knowledge in minutes. So the scribes, usually monks or highly trained clerks, work in the cold. They sit on hard wooden benches, wrapped in layers of wool, their fingers stiff and blue. Writing in the Middle Ages is not a creative flow. It is manual labor. There is no paper. There is parchment, sheepskin, or vellum, calfskin. To make a single book, a flock of sheep must die. The skins are soaked in lime, scraped of hair and flesh with a sharp knife, stretched on a frame until tight as a drum, and then sanded smooth with pumice. It smells of wet dog and slaughterhouse. If you look closely at a page of a medieval Bible, you might see the follicles of the animal's hair, or a scar from where the sheep cut itself on a briar while it was alive. You are writing on a corpse. The ink is another chemical concoction. Iron gall ink is the standard. It is made from oak galls, hard growths on oak trees caused by wasps, mixed with iron salts and wine. It is acidic. Over centuries, the ink bites into the parchment. Sometimes it burns right through, leaving lace-like holes where the words used to be. The scribe dips his quill, a goose feather he has had to cure and cut with a precision knife, into the black liquid. He works for hours in silence. The only sound is the scratching of the nib. He cannot make a mistake. You cannot hit backspace. If he slips, he has to scrape the ink off with a razor blade, thinning the skin. Copyist's cramp is a recognized occupational hazard. Scribes leave notes in the margins of these holy texts, tiny complaints that survive across the centuries. The ink is thin. My hand hurts. It is cold. Thank God it is time for dinner. These tiny voices humanize the dry history. They are bored, tired men doing a job. And sometimes they get weird. In the margins of serious legal texts or prayer books, you find marginalia, doodles, knights fighting giant snails, rabbits executing hunters, nuns picking fruit from phallic trees. It's a glimpse into the suppressed humor and boredom of the medieval mind. Books are rare and incredibly valuable. A single Bible costs as much as a small farm. In the university libraries or cathedral schools, the books are literally chained to the shelves. Knowledge is a prisoner. You cannot check a book out. You must stand there, reading it, while the iron chain clatters against the wood. But let us leave the quiet of the tower and go back to the noise of the town that has grown up in the shadow of the castle walls. It is market day. The castle gates are open. The drawbridge is down. The toll collector stands at the entrance, taking a cut of every cart of grain, every basket of eggs, and every bolt of cloth that enters. This is the castle's income. The market is a sensory explosion. After the gray monotony of the keep, the market is a riot of color. Merchants have traveled from afar. You smell things that don't belong in your muddy village: cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, and pepper. These spices have traveled thousands of miles, passed from hand to hand along the Silk Road to end up here. They are worth more than gold by weight. A handful of peppercorns can pay your rent for a year. They are sold in tiny amounts, weighed on delicate scales. You see fabrics you've never touched, silk from the East, velvet from Italy. But watch your purse. Cut purses are everywhere. They use a small knife to slit the bottom of your hanging pouch and catch the coins as they fall.
If you are cheated in the market, if the baker sells you a loaf that is too light, or the alewife sells you watered-down beer, justice is instant. There is a special court held right there in the dust, known as the Court of Pie Powders, from the French pieds poudrés, dusty feet. It is a court for travelers and merchants. The judge sits on a crate. The verdict is given before the sun sets. If the baker is guilty, he is dragged to the tumbrel, a ducking stool. He is strapped into a chair and dunked into the river or the village cesspit. It is public humiliation again. Or he might be dragged on a hurdle, a wooden sled, through the streets with the offending loaf of bread tied around his neck. But amidst the haggling, there is entertainment. A troupe of traveling players has set up a stage on a wagon. They are performing a mystery play. It is a Bible story, Noah's Ark or the Resurrection, but adapted for a peasant audience. It is bawdy, loud, and funny. Noah's wife is depicted as a shrew who refuses to get on the boat because she wants to finish her drink with her friends. The crowd roars with laughter. This is their Netflix. It is the only storytelling they get that isn't a sermon. In the crowd, you notice a figure that everyone avoids. He is dressed distinctively, perhaps with a specific badge or colored hood. He is the executioner. We spoke of his work, but consider his life. He is an untouchable. In many towns, he is legally forbidden from living within the walls. He must live in a shack outside the city limits. He cannot enter a tavern. If he wants a drink, he has to stand at the door, and the innkeeper hands him a cup, which must be broken afterwards so no one else uses it. No one will marry his daughter, except perhaps the son of another executioner or a rat catcher. He is a necessary evil. The town needs him to enforce the law, but they hate him for doing it. He is often granted the right to take a handful of grain from every sack in the market, a tax called the havoc. He walks through the stalls, taking his share, and the merchants recoil, letting him take what he wants just to make him leave. But paradoxically, he is also a healer. The medieval mind believes that the body of an executed man possesses magical power. The hand of glory, the severed hand of a hanged man, is a prized talisman for thieves. The rope used to hang a criminal is bought as a cure for headaches. The executioner sells the fat of the dead men he kills. It is used as a salve for rheumatism. He is a dealer in death and a dealer in macabre medicine.
He lives in a world of blood and superstition, isolated by his trade. As evening falls, the market packs up. The gates of the castle begin to close. You rush back inside. To be shut out at night is to be vulnerable to the outlaws and the wolves. Back inside, you reflect on the passage of time. You are getting older. You are 35, perhaps 40. In the Middle Ages, you are now an elder. Your body is failing. The heavy lifting, the bad diet, and the lack of dentistry have taken their toll. You are tired. What is the end game for you? There is no pension. If you have children, you hope they will care for you. If not, you might try to buy a garrote. A garrote is a form of medieval retirement plan. You give a monastery or the Lord a lump sum of money or a piece of land. In exchange, they promise to feed you, clothe you, and house you until you die. You become a garrotean. You live in the monastery, not as a monk, but as a guest. It sounds peaceful, but often the monks resent you. You are a mouth to feed that doesn't work. You sit in the cloisters, waiting for the end, listening to the chanting, hoping that you made a good deal and that you don't live so long that they start wishing you dead to save money. But the world around you is changing. It is the late 14th or early 15th century now. A new smell has entered the battlefield, one sharper and more sulfurous than the alchemist's lab: gunpowder. For centuries, the castle was the ultimate power. A lord in a stone tower could defy a king. He could pull up the drawbridge and wait it out. But now, rumors are coming from the east and the south. There are iron tubes that spit fire and thunder. The bombard, the early cannon. It is a clumsy, dangerous beast. It often explodes and kills its own crew. But when it works, it fires a stone ball that weighs 300 pounds. You stand on the battlements and look at your massive stone walls. They are vertical, high, and flat. They were designed to stop men climbing up, but against a cannonball, they are a disaster. The impact of a cannonball on a high, flat wall shatters the stone at the base. The physics are undeniable. The wall collapses. The castle, the symbol of the Middle Ages, is becoming obsolete. The new forts will be low, thick, and star-shaped, designed to deflect cannon fire. The age of the high stone tower is ending. The age of the knight in shining armor is ending too. A bullet from a primitive handgun can punch through the finest plate armor that took a smith a year to make. The feudal system is cracking. The Black Death killed so many peasants that the survivors realized they had value. They started demanding wages. They started moving to the towns. The serf, tied to the land like a piece of furniture, is becoming a laborer who can negotiate. You feel this shift. The absolute authority of the Lord is waning. The world is becoming wider, louder, and more mechanical. But for tonight, the walls still stand. You head back to your pallet in the great hall. You are a survivor. You have lived through the cold, the hunger, the plague, and the filth. You have navigated a world of arbitrary violence and deep superstition. You lie down in the dark. The fire has died down to embers. The smoke still hangs in the air. You hear the rats scratching. You hear the wind howling. You pull your cloak tight. The history books will record the battles and the kings. They will list the dates of treaties and the names of dynasties, but they will leave out the smell of the garderobe. They will leave out the taste of the moldy bread. They will leave out the feeling of the flea biting your ankle in the dark. They will leave out you. But now you know. You know what it really was like. You know that the castle was not a fairy tale. It was a machine for survival, a stone shell against a hostile world. And you, the silent, invisible inhabitant, were the ghost in the machine. The bell tolls for Compline, the last prayer of the day. Close your eyes. The stone is cold. The night is long, but you are safe for now.